Well, I was hoping to have had more input, but a big part of that I realized was my error, and partially YouTube, since it kept turning on and off my comments. So I would figure it out, get them turned on, and then go back and they'd be turned off again. Took me like 4 times to get the comments to stay on. So by then, there were quite a few views of people that didn't get an opportunity to vote. So it's a good thing that number 4 is actually a small one, because that will give opportunity next time for things to be uploaded correctly in order to get more input. So this is a kit. This is countered cross stitch. I bought a bunch of kits, and so my goal is to get these kits all done and out of the way before I delve back into my Artisy cross stitch shop files that take much more, I don't know what the word is I'm looking for, but to get them set up, it takes more, because you have to make sure you have the right size fabric. You have to go through your cross stitch thread stash, get out all the different ones, get it all set up. When it comes in, when you buy a kit like this, everything is done already. So you can see that your threads are already done. Your fabric is cut to the size that you need. Don't worry about this Chinese writing. Guess if I understood Chinese and didn't know how to cross stitch already, I would figure out how to do it, but don't worry about that. Usually when you buy a kit, you do get needles. These kind of not my favorite. They go into my stash typically for emergencies only, because I do tend to lose my needles a lot. Fortunately, they're usually just lost in the couch rather than somewhere where they're found by a foot. So here's where things began. The only thing I did ahead of time was print my patterns out, and that is because what is used as my stand for my phone right now is my paper tray on my computer. So I can't really film and print at the same time. So I went ahead and printed out the pattern. This is what it looks like in the kit. So this will be this is the master that I will save. So if I ever decide I want to do this one again, I still have the master pattern. I don't know where I put the rest of those. I photocopy them so that I can mark off the stitches that I've already done. When I do patterns from Artisy, I'm able to use a program called Pattern Keeper, and it's on my tablet, which is really nice because I don't have to do pen and paper. But because this is a kit, alright, now that I've freed up some space on my computer, hopefully my video doesn't end again. Again, this is Aida cloth, 14 count, 14 holes per square inch. The older I get, the bigger this count needs to be, unfortunately. Think about this in terms of pixels. So when you're doing a cross stitch, the smaller the stitch count, the more detailed your piece is. So as your count stitch goes up, the picture gets more quote unquote like grainy. So I imagine that if my eyes get much worse, I probably will give up this hobby as well, simply because I won't be able to use the smaller fabrics, and I will be really disappointed with the finished product. So now I'm going to kit up the thread. Most kits, your threads come on cards like this. I really hate these. Because getting threads off of here, you have to like pull it, you know, and they tend to get really tangled. I purchased these. Ooh, there we are. So this little card right here slides out, so you can put your symbols or your numbers or whatever. So I will be doing that. And this section right here is foam, for people that like to use multiple needles. Like I said, I tend to lose needles, so I never use that feature of these. Because if I could lose one needle, could you imagine if I had 30 needles set up on here at one time? So I'll show you how this works. Let me make sure I have everything in frame before I sit down. So this pattern has 20 colors, so I will only need one of those. I tend to try to write really small in these so that I can use them for multiple patterns. 1, 2, 3. Okay. If you have a fine tip pen, it really helps you to be able to write really small on these. I discovered trying to do that on just a regular ballpoint pen. I can't write small enough. Oops. Should have let that dry a little bit because I smeared some of those numbers, but that's okay because I know how to count. So I'll show you the difference between this. So with this, you use one strand. So embroidery floss is six strands in each thing. And you use two threads, typically for your fabric. On 14 count, it's generally recommended that you use 3 threads for full coverage, but I prefer to use the loop method to start my projects, and there's not a way to do that. Oy vey, I should have checked sooner whether or not I was still recording. I wasn't, so you guys didn't really get to see the full setup of the threads. So I removed them all from the card, and they're up here by their designated colors off that card. And again, as I said earlier, I really do not like using those cards, so I don't bother saving them as well. Although now that I'm thinking about it, I may add it to my junk journaling supplies, because I could probably use it for some sort of decoration. Threads that come in a kit are not always mainstream colors. This particular kit is listed as DMC colors. DMC is one of the primary manufacturers of embroidery thread. However, the threads that you get in kits typically do not match well against what you buy in hobby stores. The dye lots are typically very off, and so your colors don't match. Depending on what your project is, that won't matter. Like if you're stitching trees, does it really matter if your greens are 2 different shades of the same number? Not really, because leaves aren't all the same color. But if you look at the bird cross stitch that I just finished, it would be dramatically noticeable if halfway through the bird I switched dye lots, because then half the bird would be one shade of yellow and the other half would be a different shade of yellow, and you'd have a very clear line of demarcation. This is an embroidery hoop. They come in, there's many different styles. I prefer these kind that have the screw that comes off. So again, with a kit, they typically will provide you with the fabric that you, the size fabric that you need, so you don't have to worry so much about figuring out where the center of your fabric is. On this particular pattern, they mark the center with these red lines. So right there is the center. There's a big glare. Right there is the center of the pattern, just above that handle. Some people will find that center point and work their way out in all four directions. It kind of assures you that you've got enough space around all of the edges when your project is done. I tend to work from a corner, so I just make sure that wherever my first stitch is at least an inch on each side. So with this one I am going to start in the center just because of the size of my hoop versus the size of my fabric. I think if I tried to start from the corner, I would frustrate myself because it wouldn't stay in the hoop very well. People do use these kind of hoops in different ways. Like sometimes they'll make it so that the fabric folds over. I prefer it to fold in because then any oils or anything it still picks up off of my hands goes onto the back of the fabric as I'm holding the hoop. Versus if it was the other way, I'd be holding the fabric this way and stuff would be getting on the surface of the fabric. We tighten this down, which I do tend to do. Why is this not? Oh, it's not all the way in, that's why. There we go. So tighten the screw up. As much as I have deleted off of my phone, I still only have 8 minutes on this video, and then it's going to time me out again. So you just tighten it up, tighten it up. Oh, I forgot to mark my center. Oh, I think it's right. I can see where I folded it. It's right there. So that is getting your kit prepped. So you have your pattern, you have your fabric on your hoop, and you have your threads all ready to go. So next videos, we'll start by showing you how I do things.